Welcome to Discussions with the Writer Fred, right here at Black Video News in good old San Antonio, Texas. We are the voice for the black community here in San Antonio. Today I have a very special guest with me, a person who has a great deal of experience in freelance journalism, has written some great reviews and stories about some very popular, well-known people in our community, and that is Mr. Gerald Bell, all the way from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome, Mr. Bell, to Discussions with the Writer Fred.
Thank you so much, Fred. Good to be here. Appreciate this opportunity.
Okay. You know, you're right around the corner from where I was born. I was born in Saginaw, Michigan. Right
Oh,
up
yeah,
the
that's
road.
right up the street there a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Been away from there for a
Yeah.
long time, but that is
All
home.
right.
Home. I know you
Oh
get some
man.
cold winters there in Grand
Hey,
Rapids.
I call it the frozen tundra. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
let's get into our
Winter.
interview,
Let's go
Mr.
for
Bell.
it. Yeah.
Can you tell our viewers what do you do in terms of being a freelance journalist? In case we have some writers out there that might want to do the same thing in the future.
Yeah, to the freelance writer and or the future writer, I'll probably speak to the most because I love the opportunity to mentor and to empower and to educate whenever possible. Um, for those that are just interested in, what somebody else's profession might be about, here basically is the scope. As a freelance writer, you have the privilege of taking on an array of assignments. And I think it's important, as a freelance writer, first of all, to be readily available as much as possible, to not just write, but to have an opportunity also to do Q&A sessions, talk with individuals that have something to say. And that could come in different, uh, I guess, respects. There is having something to say when there's a need for information. There is having something to say when there is a need to convey and communicate what's important to an audience. But there's also having something to say when you have an experience that someone could gain or learn from, to empower and to educate as well. And so, as a freelance writer, it's a privilege that you have to either inform or to educate or to tell a story. And I think all of those are different in one respect or another. But I think it's important as a freelance writer or just as a writer, period, to be constantly reading, constantly uh, taking on other opportunities to tell someone else's story because it's a skill set that never grows old in terms of developing. I think you're always improving as a writer, no matter how many times you do it. I don't know that any author or writer has ever said, "Hey, I finally arrived. I'll never get any better than I am today." And so it's a thing where your passion is exuding in print.
So it is, you have to have the passion for almost any writing, don't you? You have to love the art of writing.
Definitely got to love the art of writing. And you know what? You got to be adaptable with that to some degree because no two stories are the same or about the same thing. Even if it's an update on a respective crisis or an issue, that update is different than the original story. And so being able to get inside of the information and have a full comprehensive understanding as to what the situation or the story or the scenario is about, and then making a critical decision. The critical decision you have to make as a writer is this, is what exactly am I going to tell my readership? Because if I spend the time on the phone, talking with someone for 45 minutes to an hour, but I'm only going to write a 1 page or a 2 page article. I can't say every single thing that was said in that 1 hour conversation. So I have to determine to make a decision for the reader, what's important for them to know, to prioritize that, and then from there, make sure that that's included as part of the content that gets conveyed in that written piece. And so, yeah,
How true, how important is truth? How important is truth?
I guess if you're a writer from a journalist standpoint, your integrity is always at stake. And so truth is, I think to ask the question, how important is it? Um, might be better asked is, is truth important at all? And is truth important to people? I think people want to know truth. Nobody wants to be lied to. And I think at the moment you feel as though, okay, what's being conveyed or what's being communicated as a journalist, from this perspective, writer or journalist, is not the truth. Okay, at that point, the entire article becomes counterfeit. No matter how much truth or things that are right in the article, the moment you spin the content, the moment you gray something that isn't gray, you've compromised the integrity of the entire article. You've compromised your integrity as a writer to be someone to be trusted to communicate information. And so truth that's the bottom line in all of this. I mean, unless you're just writing fiction,
Yeah.
making something up, truth is critical.
Yeah, yeah. What road do you think a person should take if they want to become a writer like you are? What college classes did they take, or what should they do?
Yeah. I think it's always important to at least take some sort of coursework, because in the classroom is where you kind of get the formalized, I'll just say, foundation laid. But I think beyond taking classes now, I'm not going to say that a writer, because to some extent, a writer might have certain natural abilities to write. And that's not to say, okay, everybody has to go to journalism school. There are a number of writers who didn't study writing or English or journalism at all. They studied history, or they studied, stats, depending upon what it is, the subject matter that they're interested in. But I think, to answer your question more specifically, definitely take some coursework to get a feel for what the industry kind of demands in terms of writing and integrity, learning about AP style guides and that sort of thing, and what those elements mean when it comes to just communicating where a publication might require a certain format or a style, so that you'll know what to deliver. But beyond that, I think, as I said earlier, you got to do it on a regular basis. It's one of those things where you never perfect the craft. You can only get better at it. And so I think every opportunity that you have to write, be it for something being published, be it for pay or not, but spend time just crafting just some of your own thoughts and ideals and stories that you think are of value to you, and that might be of value to a reader as well. I think another thing I would want to maybe add to this, and that is, it's critical for a writer to know their audience, know exactly who it is that you're conveying to, and what is it about the story, or what is it about the content that is important to them. It also helps to know not only your audience, but if you can relate to that audience in one way or another. Let's just say, as a Black male, I love it when I have an opportunity to write to the Black male audience, because that's the demographic that I'm a part of.
Right.
As a working professional, I love the opportunity to be able to write to other working professionals as well, because that's the community that I'm a part of. So when I can relate and identify with a respective audience or demographic, that qualifies me more so with someone with credibility to speak to whatever the subject matter is.
I think we're going to take a break here, but when we come back, Mr. Bell, could you share with our viewers some of the more interesting interviews you've done in your career?
Happy to. Yes, let's do it.
Okay. We'll be right back here with discussion with the writer, Fred.
2021 is complete. Good or bad, you made it through. The year of many firsts. It will not be easily forgotten. The Black Book Yearbook will help you capsule the year that was 2021. Own your part of history. Get your yearbook today at blacksinsanantonio.com. For the latest news and community activities, visit our companion site, blackvideonews.com, celebrating over 10 years of documenting the community.
My Shiro doesn't always wear a cape, but she always has time for a hug, a smile, for going the extra mile. My Shiro stretches every dollar, puts in long hours, puts others first. But now it's your time, Mom. When you're ready to retire, we want you to be able to enjoy it. It's time to start saving now. A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today. Visit aceyourretirement.org/Shiro.
Welcome back to Discussions with the Writer Fred, right here at Black Video Network and News in San Antonio, Texas. We are the voice for the Black community here. And my special guest today is Mr. Gerald Bell, and he is a freelance journalist. And now I'm going to ask Mr. Bell to please share with us, our viewers, some of the more interesting stories that you've done.
Sure. So let me just give you this piece of context. A lot of my contributions have been committed to a publication out of Los Angeles called LA Focus. And as I mentioned before we went to break, I think it's important for a writer to always, and I would say always, but to be able to identify with the audience that they're writing to or writing for. And so LA Focus is a publication that is specifically to the African American community, circulates in the African American community in Los Angeles, with an emphasis on the faith and entertainment community as well. I'm a man of faith. I'm a man who's worked in the entertainment industry. And so with that in mind, and being a person of color, all those components of the audience that this publication appeals to or addresses, I can relate to as well. So man, I've had the opportunity to interview an array of people, sports figures, entertainers, actors, actresses, professionals in all kinds, politicians. I'll do a little bit of name dropping. Some of these will be familiar with you, and some of them probably won't. One of the names I'll mention to you is Stacey Abrams. She ran for governor of Georgia,
right?
And had a great conversation with her to just kind of get a better understanding on her passion and drive for getting people out to vote and recruiting voters in the state of Georgia, and just the impact that she has had in that particular world. One of the things that I will say was a great takeaway from that article or from that interview with Stacey Abrams was she said, righteous indignation requires action. And I put that quote in my article. For me, that was a thing where, it's easy for us to feel like we're always right. It's easy for an individual to feel like, okay, their decisions and their choices, whether they choose to vote or to not vote, is what's right for them. And if that is your position, that's fine. But what is the action that you're taking in response to that? I think neutrality is something that has gone away. We're in a position in our world today where you have to take a stand on one side or the other because we're divided as a nation and as a culture and as a world. Everybody's looking for you to tell you, okay, what side of the fence are you on politically? What side of the issue, what side are you on as far as issues are concerned, no matter what the subject matter is? And so I think, my takeaway from Stacey Abrams was, okay, whatever your position is, take action in that. Don't just stand back and say, okay, this is what I believe, this is the side I'm on, but let's move forward with it. I also recently had an interview with a gentleman by the name of Demetrius Shipp. He's a music producer from the hip hop era out of Los Angeles. Okay. And Demetrius Shipp has worked with everybody from Bobby Brown to all the new Jack folks that were in the market as well. His nickname was just Shipp. Like I said, may not have heard it before, but as a producer, you research Demetrius Shipp. His son, Demetrius Shipp Jr., played the role of Tupac Shakur.
Oh, really?
As an actor as well, yeah, in the movie, yeah. And so I think it was one of those things where I wanted to kind of share from that interview also. This young man inspired me deeply because I asked him, I said, one of my questions was, if you had to write a letter today to your 14-year-old self, and the reason I asked him that question because at the age of 14, he made some critical decisions. He joined the gang. He owned a weapon. His life was going spiraling downhill, dropping out of school, but eventually turned his life around. Has a great story. But I said, if you had to write a letter to your 14-year-old self today, what would you tell yourself? He said these words: never assume that anybody knows what's going on inside your mind. You have to tell them. Okay. He said, and no matter what your actions are, the best thing you can do is speak what it is that people need to know about you. Never assume that they already know what you're capable of. Never assume that they already know what you're subject to. You have to speak the word and tell them. He said, so I began to kind of tell people my story. I began to kind of tell people what I was interested in. He said, and once I began to open up my mouth, the opportunity for me to become a music producer just began to kind of flood, my whole life. Mm-hmm. There's another story I found interesting also. I would love for you to Google this young man's name. His name is Freddie Figures. He was nicknamed Dumpster Baby. Freddie Figures was discovered outside of a dumpster as an infant. And a passerby just so happened to notice a baby was crying outside of a dumpster, picked the baby up, took him to the police station in Florida. Police then was able to get him into foster care, and ultimately he was adopted. Man had a very traumatic childhood, being called and teased and picked on as a kid, being called dumpster baby. And so one of the things that his adopted parents did for him is they gave him an old computer back in the day. I think it was a big block Apple computer. And he decided that he was just going to take the entire thing apart and put it back together again. So one of the things that he found himself doing was gravitating towards technology. Ultimately, he went to school to become an engineer. Freddie figures today as a multimillionaire. Has an incredible story. He's a philanthropist, gives money away, runs a multi-million-dollar company, a technology firm, and is doing incredible things.
And he was raised in a foster home?
He was raised in foster care, found outside of a dumpster. And his life is completely transformed now. And so as a freelance writer, those are some opportunities I've had. I mean, the list could go on and on and on in terms of individuals. I love the article that I did on former Los Angeles Laker player Derek Fisher. This was for a section of the publication called Saving Grace. And while many times athletes don't get an opportunity to express their faith publicly because it's so controversial, Derek Fisher was very open and very honest about his passion and love for God. And one of the things that he told me about his passion and love for God is that it made him much more of a liberal giver. And in this article, he talked about the fact that God loves a cheerful giver. So he felt like if anything he would ever want in life, that would be God's love, then he would do what the Bible says do, and that is to give cheerfully. And so Derek talked about how when he earned championship rings, he bought rings for family members. He bought rings for his former basketball coaches. He bought rings for his family members. Everybody got rings. And so he said, that was just one of my ways of just being generous. And so, but even former coaches would say, okay, whenever this guy shows up on the basketball court, never is it about him. He's so generous and benevolent to make sure that the other players are being given their opportunities also to shine and to score points and to earn their just due as players as well. And so, just great opportunity. I'm going to drop one more name. This is a name you can Google also. A woman by the name of Tabitha Plummer. Tabitha Plummer is a major sports agent woman out of Los Angeles as well, actually. And so here's someone that has climbed the ladder that in many cases, when she's in professional settings in the boardroom, she's the only African-American. She's the only female amongst nothing but white males. And in that world, she's been able to navigate well. And I was able to kind of tell her story about how in those settings, people have raised questions about her, but there's the respect that she has, so much so now that even beyond sports, people like Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, they're all calling on her to represent them beyond the sports world as well. So those are some of the people that I've found. I mean, just have very interesting stories and just an array of opportunities, to not only have conversations with them, but to give them a chance also to be transparent, to be self-disclosing, and to allow other folks to see a side of them that they don't normally get to see on the television screen or in other public settings.
Okay, fantastic. We're going to take another break, but when we come back, can you tell our viewers something about Gerald Bell? Something about you, okay?
You got it.
We'll be right back with discussion with the writer Fred here at Black Video News Network in San Antonio, Texas.
Veterans, when you're struggling, soon becomes later, becomes someday, becomes when. Don't wait. Reach out.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello, this is Cornell with Frost Bank.
Hi there, this is Terry with Frost.
Good evening, this is Franklin.
This is Robert with Frost.
Hello, this is Rosemary with Frost Bank.
Welcome back to discussion with the writer Fred right here at Black Video News Network in San Antonio, Texas. And I am thrilled to be able to interview someone who's becoming a friend to me. That's Mr. Gerald Bell out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I started to say Missouri. No way, Michigan, good old Michigan. So, Mr. Bell, tell our viewers something about Gerald Bell. If you were interviewing yourself, what would you tell the interviewer about you?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. As a journalist, one thing you know is that everybody has a story. And you know what, Fred, to be honest with you, my story, it's could be a long and arduous one, but suffice it to say, I'm just grateful to be where I am today. The trajectory I think that I was on as a youngster, and many of us could say this, was probably not headed this direction. I mean, I can look back at past decisions as a young person, exploring the drug culture, exploring the gang culture, and, failing in school and, D and C average grades and trying to figure it all out, coming up in a single parent home and the youngest of 6 kids and trying to fit in and, trying to figure out, okay, what my life's purpose is all about. And so I took it upon myself to pack up and leave the inner city where I grew up of Columbus, in Columbus, Ohio. I left there and decided, okay, I was just going to have a fresh start. So I ended up going to college at Cleveland State University to study communications. I was fortunate to have an internship in high school at the local radio station. And I think that's what cracked it for me. I began to kind of see the potential that I ultimately have in terms of my skill set and ability to communicate, be it in radio and print, et cetera. And so went to school at Cleveland State University. I didn't finish my undergrad there. I transferred ultimately to a Christian liberal arts college in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I finished my undergraduate work. But it was an opportunity for me to really begin to kind of learn and understand, okay, wow, there is so much more to me than what people were telling me. There was so much more to me than my peers and my upbringing was communicating to me. I mean, if I left it to my teachers, if I left it to my peers, and even to some extent family members, them all telling me I would never amount to anything. Them all telling me you're dumb and stupid. Them all telling me, you don't have a future. And I mean, teachers, principals, what should be role models, all communicating that same thing. And then a grade card to support those words as well. But eventually it all turned around. I became a 4.0 student, graduated with honors, got a master's degree, have several certifications from UCLA, Davenport University, everything, I think that was not expected of me ultimately happened. I'm an adjunct professor here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I teach communications in college as well. And so, and then the opportunity to function as a journalist and, and write for several publications and do freelance editing also for publications and books and so forth and other writers and authors. Those are things that no one has had me paid for coming up. In fact, I can look back at many of my peers today who are still in the same neighborhood, still doing some of the same drugs, still making some of the same choices, but they're 3 or 4 decades older than they were back at that time. And so I'm very grateful just for opportunities for someone to see something in me, but also for me to see something in myself that no one was conveying to me that I think was a turnaround point for me to be able to be in a position, to be able to make some choices and to demand some things. And I'll just say this to kind of quote my own figures for my future. Yeah.
So besides the joy or the fulfillment you get from being able to write, what's the compensation like?
Most freelance journalists will tell you that they are not millionaires as a result, at least not as a result of writing for any publication whatsoever. But I'll say this specifically, let me speak to those that might be aspiring writers. There's a couple of different ways the industry tends to work. There is either the flat fee for a respective article, and they'll give you a word count. And then there's in many cases, there is a per word fee as well. And that can range anywhere from 10 cents to $2, $3, $4 per word, depending upon the publication. It also depends on what the story is about. It also depends on the credibility of the writer and their longevity and them and what their byline brings to that publication to have them included. And so with that in mind, I would say, it's up to you as a writer what value you know about yourself, that you see in yourself. sometimes you're going to have to quote that figure, or sometimes you're going to have to accept what the publication offers based on their own budget and what they allocate to their freelancers or to their writing staff, period. But I think I think what's important is that you get the byline, is that you get the opportunity to be read, by the public, by the readership of that publication. And some days it's going to be great. Some days it's going to be like, okay, I didn't expect this. And other days it's going, wow, I could have used more, but I felt like I put more work into the story than what I got paid. But I think the passion of writing and the passion of being able to make sure that readership is informed, educated, with integrity and honesty should always be a first priority. And I think the dollars will follow the writer that has those things as their priority in terms of what their agenda is for writing that can contribute to a publication.
Absolutely. Do you get political?
You know what? I will say this. I don't write from a political perspective in terms of opinion, but I have quoted and or interviewed politicians to get their take on perhaps why the public should either vote for them, what their heart is on the issues, and just at least get an understanding in terms of what their beliefs are and what they want the public to know. Yeah, so Alan Keyes is someone that I've interviewed before.
Alan Keyes?
Yeah, Governor Gavin out of California I've interviewed before. There's an array of folks, and again, just to kind of get their perspective on why they were campaigning and what they hope the readership and the voters would take away in terms of what they believe are the right choices politically. But I've steered away from it in to some extent because it's just not a passion area of mine. Okay. I don't have a problem taking a position on the issues, but in most cases I don't write about them whatsoever. Yeah, because I like to just keep the playing field wide open for opportunities to write about an array of subjects.
Right. How is your distribution? Is it just to LA or do you go national?
Yeah, well, I mean, because of, in the world of digital media, we have access to, it goes beyond Los Angeles in terms of being available digitally, but the print publication is still exclusive to Southern California. Yep.
So you are excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you just want to look it up, it's lafocusnewspaper.com.
lafocusnewspaper.com. Yes. And they can read your articles online?
That's right there.
Oh,
yes,
okay,
sir.
Great. Do you also have a hard copy? Do you publish a hard copy? Or is it
it's a monthly publication that also releases the first week of every month, and those are distributed hard copy through throughout the LA County, but also the publication is available to be received in the mail as well. I think it's like a $25 a year prescription, and so that subscription will get you 12 issues a year.
Okay, we're about out of time, Mr. Bell. So, is there any final words you would like to offer to my viewers? Any words of wisdom?
So, my words of wisdom, this is always a writer, that if it wasn't for writing, there would not be the opportunity to learn, there would not be the opportunity to grow, there would not be the opportunity to be empowered. And even as much as we might hear so much more in sound bites these days, ultimately the words that someone articulates had to be written by someone. And so power to the writers out there who convey information. And I don't care if you're producing textbooks, if you're producing newspapers, magazines, encyclopedias, or Wikipedia, there has to be a writer somewhere in your world. And so thank God for writers.
Well, thank you, sir, for joining us in discussion with the writer Fred, and hopefully I can have you back at a later date to continue this conversation.
My pleasure, Fred.
Okay, yeah. This discussion with the writer Fred, as usual, telling our story our way.